Imagine you're standing at the edge of a frozen waterfall, massive ice formations climbing up a canyon wall. The only sounds are your footsteps crunching through packed snow and water trickling somewhere deep beneath the ice. When you look up, there's nothing but blue sky and snow draped mountains surrounding you. This is winter hiking in Banff, and it's completely different from anything you'll experience in summer. Hey friends, welcome back to the Banff Travel Podcast. Today we're talking about one of my absolute favorite winter activities, winter hiking. Here's what a lot of people don't realize. Winter transforms the trails around Banff into something entirely new. And those crowded summer trails, in winter you might have them almost entirely to yourself. But winter hiking isn't just summer hiking with snow, and most importantly, not all summer hikes make good winter hikes. Hiking in the winter requires different preparation, different gear, and honestly, a different mindset. Today, I'm sharing everything you need to know to safely and confidently explore Banff's winter trails, from easy snowy walks to more challenging winter adventures. When there's some gear that's going to be non-negotiable, you need to stay safe in avalanche terrain, and why winter hiking might just become your new favorite way to experience the Rockies. Let's dive in. Okay, before we get into specific trails, I need to talk about what makes winter hiking so special and so different from summer. First is the obvious, the scenery is completely transformed. I've hiked Johnston Canyon probably 50 times. It never gets old in the winter. The waterfalls are frozen into these incredible blue-white sculptures, and if you're lucky, you'll see ice climbers scaling the upper falls, which is pretty incredible to witness. Or take Johnson Lake. In the summer, it's a pleasant walk around a pretty lake. In the winter, you have snow-covered trees, mountains draped in snow. If the ice is thick enough and hasn't been covered in snow, it becomes a massive natural skating rink. But always remember to be safe first and be able to check the ice thickness before venturing out on it. Second, in the winter, you need to think about the length of your hike. That 10-kilometer summer hike, maybe not for winter. In the winter, maybe you want to be doing 3 to 5 kilometers instead. But that's not because you're less fit, but because winter hiking is slower and can be a lot more work. If you're navigating on packed snow, possibly wearing micro spikes or snowshoes, and then you're dealing with cold temperatures and just a lot more adjustment to your layers. Finally, realistically, you may just not want to be outside for as long. But here's the beautiful thing about shorter distances. You can still have an incredible experience in just a couple of hours. A couple of kilometer winter walk to a frozen waterfall can be just as memorable as an all-day summit hike you did in July. And then finally, the crowds disappear. Even popular trails like Johnston Canyon, which gets absolutely mobbed in the summer, can feel peaceful in the winter. Yes, you're still going to see people, especially on weekends, but it's nothing compared to the shoulder-to-shoulder summer crowds. Early morning winter hikes often feel like you have the entire park to yourself. We were just at Johnston Canyon yesterday. We arrived just before 9 a.m., so before any of the tours arrived, and honestly, we had the entire place to ourselves. Now, we continued up to the ink pots, and so it was much busier on the way back as we came back through Johnston Canyon around lunchtime, but it was such a treat to have the entire way up all to ourselves. We didn't see a single person on the way up to the ink pots and back. And actually, we didn't really encounter anyone on the way back until we got down to the lower falls. But, and this is important, with that solitude does come more responsibility. In the summer, if something goes wrong, there's almost always people around. In the winter, you might be on your own. So you need to make sure you're prepared, and I'll get into that in more detail. Now let me walk you through some of my favorite winter hikes, because not everybody wants the same experience, so I've organized them by difficulty so you can pick and choose which ones you feel like. And of course, I have a blog post on all of these, which I will leave in the show notes. So some easy winter walks that are perfect for first-timers, of course, would include Johnston Canyon. Johnston Canyon is a winter hike I recommend to everyone visiting Banff in the winter. It's only 2.5 kilometers to the upper fall. Now, this trail gets so much traffic that it is packed down solid, but you're going to need micro spikes for traction on those icy sections. But otherwise, it's very manageable. But like I said, because it gets packed down so much, it's going to be slippery. I have seen far too many people clinging to the side rails trying not to fall. Do yourself a favor, just rent the micro spikes, and you'll enjoy the hike so much more if you aren't constantly feeling like you're going to slip and fall. Now, the lower falls are impressive, but I highly recommend you keep going to the upper falls, When you round that corner and see the massive frozen waterfall, often with ice climbers hanging off it, it's a pretty cool scene. Now, as I said earlier, my local tip here is to still go early. And I mean, sometime between 8 and 9 a.m. So that's not super early. Especially on weekends, even in the winter, it is still going to get very busy. So going early morning gives you fewer people, and even better if you can go on a weekday. Next up is the Johnson Lake Loop. It's my go-to for families or anyone wanting a peaceful, scenic winter walk. The 3-kilometer loop around the lake is mostly flat. It's popular enough that the trail stays well packed. Again, I recommend packing those micro spikes. We literally bring them with us. Actually, they just live in our car in the wintertime. But some of those inclines on Johnson Lake Loop can get slippery. And then what I really love about this one is just the diversity of the hike. You're going to spend some time walking through the forest, along the lakeshore, and some incredible mountain views. If you want to stay a little closer to the town of Banff, the Fenland Trail is a hidden gem right in the Banff town site. It's only about 2 kilometers around, but it feels like you're in the wilderness. The trail winds through the forest and the wetlands. You may even see deer and elk there in the winter. It's quite peaceful and a perfect morning walk. And then, of course, there's Fairview Lookout. It's a short 2-kilometer hike at Lake Louise. I think it's perfectly paired with a walk along the shoreline or skating on the lake if it's frozen. From Fairview Lookout, you can get an incredible view down over the lake and the Chateau Lake Louise. Now, this is a short hike, but please be warned that the trail is steep. So again, micro spikes, well worth it. It's probably going to be packed down. You're probably not going to need snowshoes unless we have a really big snowfall. But those micro spikes will really help give you some traction. If you want something a little bit more difficult, Tunnel Mountain in the winter is still well worth doing. This 4.5-kilometer trail has switchbacks, so it can be icy and a little bit slippery. So again, broken record. You guys hear me repeat these things all the time, but I still see so many people who don't bring them. But micro spikes make a really, really big difference when it's icy. And then you get those summit views, which are absolutely outstanding. On a clear winter day, the entire Bow Valley spreads out below you, and everything is this pristine white. So again, you probably want to start out a little bit earlier for this one, as it's right in town and it can get busy, especially on a weekend. And it's just really a lot more enjoyable when you have it to yourself. One that not a lot of people know about is the Upper Stony Lookout. It's one of my favorite little winter hikes. It's short, but it's definitely more challenging. The trail climbs through the trees, and you're definitely going to feel it on the way up. But throughout the trees, they're covered in snow. It gives you that winter wonderland feeling. And then at the top, it opens up to an incredible little viewpoint over the valley and Cascade Mountain. Now, this trail gets used by winter hikers, snowshoers, sometimes fat bikers, so the conditions can vary. Sometimes it's hard packed for micro spikes. Other times you may want snowshoes if there's just been a really big dump of snow. And this one is really great if, you have somebody skiing at Mount Norquay, but you're not a skier and you want to go out and do something. You can literally get to it right from the parking lot at Mount Norquay. It's also a great add-on if you're going tubing at Mount Norquay, so it's a great little winter hike. It's not too long. You end right at the Mount Norquay ski resort. If you're looking for something a little bit longer than any of those and you want to save yourself some money, you can actually hike up Sulphur Mountain where the Banff Gondola goes. It's the same trails in the summer. It's about 5.5 kilometers up to the gondola summit. In the winter, it can obviously be much more challenging with snow and ice, but then you have the payoff at the top. You can warm up in the gondola building, you can grab a hot chocolate, you can explore the interpretive center and walk the boardwalk. However, if you really want the top all to yourself, you want to hike that trail before the gondola starts running in the morning. Now, we've been very focused on Banff here, but I have to mention that some of the best winter hikes are actually in Canmore and Kananaskis, like Grassy Lakes, for instance, one of the most popular hikes in Canmore, but it's just stunning in the winter. The trail usually well packed, but those turquoise lakes surrounded by snow are just absolutely gorgeous. Troll Falls in Kananaskis is ideal for families. Again, this is a really popular hike, but it's popular for a reason. It's an easy hike. It's basically a flat walk through the forest to a beautiful frozen waterfall. And if you brought those spikes that I keep talking about, you can continue higher to even more waterfalls. I don't necessarily recommend Troll Falls or Grassy Lakes on a weekend as they will be super busy, but if you get out early and beat the crowds, it's probably going to be fine anyways. Also in Kananaskis is Chester Lake. This one's a little bit more challenging, but so worth it. It's about 7.5 kilometers round trip, mostly through the forest, but you get the reward of a stunning frozen lake surrounded by mountain peaks at the top. And then also, like Johnston Canyon, some of these canyon hikes are absolutely beautiful in the winter, like Grotto Canyon and Kananaskis. It's an incredible winter experience. It's not going to feel like it when you start the hike. The start of the hike is not the most beautiful point. But when you're literally walking up the frozen creek and you have the canyon walls rise up on both sides of you and it creates this narrow corridor and you're walking on ice and then you get to the end and you reach a frozen waterfall, it's really, really quite incredible. So this one for sure, do not go on the ice without some type of traction device on your feet. The ice can be extremely slippery. Now, there really are so many great little winter trails. This is just a snippet of them. And I do tend to focus more on easier and shorter trails in the wintertime. We even tend to do shorter hikes in the winter just because those weather conditions, and we want to make sure we're not outside too long depending on the weather. Daylight is much shorter, and you know that weather can change fast. Now, what you probably noticed is that I didn't talk about those classic hikes in Banff, like Lake Agnes Tea House, Plain of Six Glaciers Tea House, or anything around Moraine Lake. As I said, not all summer hikes make good winter hikes. Winter hiking has real risks that summer hiking doesn't. First of all, you probably already know this, but the Moraine Lake Road is closed in the winter as it passes through avalanche terrain. The road does still get groomed and track set for cross-country skiing on the road, but it's not the entire way to the lake. There's actually a turnaround point marked where you're going to start to enter into avalanche terrain. And both of those tea house hikes also venture into avalanche terrain. If you aren't knowledgeable, you don't have the proper avalanche training, and you don't have the proper gear, you should not be venturing into avalanche terrain, period. Before every winter hike, I always check Parks Canada trail conditions, and I also do a check of Avalanche Canada forecast, which tells you the current avalanche danger rating and which elevations are at most risk. Again, if you don't have any experience in any of this, you really just want to stick to all of those low-risk trails. But even on low-risk trails, you want to be aware of your surroundings. Some trails can still cross brief avalanche paths, but are generally considered safe for winter hiking. As I've said before, you're responsible for your own safety. If you're unsure, stick to those forested trails at lower elevations, and don't just assume because you see other people going that it's safe. You can also stop in at any of the visitor centers and talk to the Parks Canada folks about your plans. I really wish more people would do this because every year I see people going on hikes that are potentially unsafe, and it's just not worth it. Of course, as we've said before, the weather changes fast in the mountains. I've been on winter hikes where we started in the sunshine and within an hour had blowing snow with near zero visibility. You need to be prepared to turn back. There's no shame in that. In fact, that's the smartest decision you can make. You do always want to check the weather forecast before you go, but you can't rely on it completely. So make sure you're packing for the worst conditions you might encounter. And if the weather turns bad on a trail, turn around. The mountains will be there tomorrow. One other thing is that daylight is limited. In December and January, you've got maybe 8 hours of daylight. That 2-hour summer hike might take 3 hours in the winter with stops to adjust gears, slower pace on the snow, and photo breaks. So plan accordingly and don't start late afternoon winter hikes. I try to start any winter hike by 9 or 10 a.m. at the latest. You want to give yourself enough time to get back. Now let's talk about gear. You want to make sure you're bringing the right gear with you. So I've mentioned micro spikes. Micro spikes are absolutely essential. Ours live in our car all winter long. We often use those over snowshoes because often the trails are packed down enough. We might bring out the snowshoes if we are going on a less traveled trail. Now, micro spikes are traction devices that slip over your boots and give you that grip on the icy trail. They often have small, dull spikes on the bottom. So we use the Catula micro spikes and we just absolutely love them. We use them on all of the hikes. Of course, winter hiking boots, they should also be waterproof and insulated. Trust me, your summer trail runners are just not going to cut it. Your feet are going to be cold, and cold feet is going to make you miserable. Layering is everything. You might want to start the hike a little cold. You're going to warm up as you hike and you're going to start sweating. I usually start in a base layer maybe a light insulating layer and a shell jacket. Within 10 minutes of hiking, I'm probably stripping off that insulating layer, stuffing it in my pack, but keeping it accessible because the moment I stop for a break, I'm putting it back on. So your body temperature is going to fluctuate wildly when you're out there winter hiking. You want to make sure your base layer is something that can wick that moisture away. Cotton is not a good idea. My base layer is usually a merino wool base layer. I always recommend also bringing, along with your mitts and your toque, you want to bring along some extra ones. Maybe you want to pack some extra warm ones just in case. And even if it seems mild when you start, if you make the mistake of not having those extra warm ones, you might need them, or the ones you have might get wet. So having an extra pair is never a bad idea. They're pretty lightweight, compressed small. You can just throw them in your pack. I always recommend having a buff as well. It's so useful. You can put it around your neck to help if it's really windy. It just makes a lot of sense to pack something small like that. That can make such a big difference. Again, hand warmers, toe warmers also are super small and can fit in your pack. Bear spray, yes, even in the winter, the bears are active until they den, which can be late November or even later in mild years. As I'm recording this on November 27th, I recently saw a video of Split Lip, one of the famous grizzly bears here, wandering through Lake Louise Village. And yesterday there was a report of a bear attack on a trail runner in Yoho National Park. So you want to carry your bear spray on every hike year round. It's just a good idea. Plus, bears aren't the only animals out there. Finally, you want to pack along some snacks and a thermos with something hot, some tea, coffee, hot chocolate, whatever you want. Not only is this a good idea to have this, but there's also something really special about stopping for a break and pulling out a thermos and having something warm to drink while you're surrounded by snowy mountains. All right, and so just a few more practical tips for this winter hiking season. Always check the trail reports before you go. Parks Canada website often has recent trip reports that tell you the current conditions. And this can help you know if you need snowshoes versus just micro spikes if there's a lot of fresh snow. You can also check all trails to see what people are saying about the trail. Parks Canada is good for any closures. And I always recommend trusting Parks Canada over all trails when it comes to knowing about closures. Alberta Parks, if you're going into the Kananaskis area, is what you want to be checking. As I said, starting early is a good idea. And I keep saying this, but it does matter. You have better light, you have fewer people, and you're done by early afternoon, which gives you some time to relax. Always pack those snacks. Winter hiking is hard work. I always pack more food than I think I'll need. Throw in some extra energy bars, nuts, chocolate, whatever keeps you fueled. Of course, it's always a good idea to tell somebody your plan, when you're going, when you expect to be back. This is just basic hiking safety, but definitely more so in the winter when the conditions can change quickly. And embrace those shorter distances. You don't need to hike 15 kilometers to have an amazing day. A 3-kilometer winter hike to a frozen waterfall can be a complete experience, and it'll give you some time in the afternoon to enjoy a walk around town or grabbing a coffee or doing something else. Now, of course, if winter hiking isn't your thing, there's so much more to winter in Banff than just hiking. You've got skiing, snowshoeing, ice skating on lakes, hot springs, the Snow Days Festival at the end of January and February, and dozens of other activities that make winter one of the best times to visit. So I've created a Banff Winter Travel Guide. It's a comprehensive resource that covers everything you need to plan an incredible winter trip. What to do, where to stay, how to pack, what gear you actually need, and more. And then you can pair that up with my 7-day Banff winter itinerary that takes all that information and gives you a day-by-day plan based on our years of experiencing winter in our own backyard. It includes winter hikes, but also skiing options, scenic drives, where to eat, backup plans for bad weather, really everything. You can check them both out at travelbanffcanada.com, and I'll put the direct links in the show notes. All right, friends, we've covered a lot of snowy ground today. The key takeaways: start with shorter distances, invest in proper gear, especially micro spikes, or plan to rent them when you're here. Always check those avalanche forecasts and weather conditions, and remember that turning back is always an option. Thank you so much for listening. If you're enjoying the podcast, I'd be incredibly grateful if you'd leave a rating or review. It genuinely helps others find the show. And if you have any questions about winter hiking, winter trips in general, or really anything, send me a message at banfftravelplanning.com/podcast. Until next time, dress in layers, pack those micro spikes, and I'll see you out on the trails.